Hey guys, I'm Brianna, welcome back to my channel. So today I'm filming my review for Ash Princess by Sebastian, and I kindly received an ARC from her agent, and I'm so thankful to have received this ARC. This book was phenomenal. I ended up giving it a 4.5 out of 5 on Goodreads, and I just adored everything about this. This is a YA fantasy about a girl named Theodisia? I'm not sure how you pronounce it 100%, but her nation was conquered when she was really little, and her mother was murdered in front of her. So after that, she pretty much was kept. She wasn't killed. She was kept as, I guess, the new king's, kind of like when you, like as a, I don't know, like a war criminal, I guess you can say. So he pretty much kept her and just paraded her around in these events to say, look how powerful I am, look who I conquered, and all that. And after, she's called the Ash Princess, because of everything. So there's like a lot that goes on in this book, and I 100% recommend it. For like the non-spoiler section right now, I would say this is a YA fantasy, 100%. It is more on the brutal side of things, but 100% reminds me of Game of Thrones. Even though I've never seen it, just the concept of Game of Thrones reminds me of this book. And just, there's a lot of like, just fantasy involved. It kind of reminds me of the Frostblood by Ellie Blake, that series. It definitely has like some Sarah J. Maas elements in this. And it was just really well written, and this is her first novel, so I was so surprised with this. But a lot of novels that have been debut novels have been amazing, so I expected nothing less. But now I'm getting on to my specific review, so this is the spoiler section. If you have not read this book, I suggest leaving and coming back so you guys don't get spoiled. But 100% recommend this book. Go read it, go check it out. It came out in April. So it's been out for a while, guys. It's May. So go just find this book, go pick it up, and go read it. Okay, so spoiler section. I took a lot of notes, so I'm pretty much going to go from like beginning to end of what I was thinking while I was reading this book, and like a lot of this, like the specifics of the book. I have not read the actual book, and it did seem bigger in the bookstore than the ARC. So she may have added different things, may have taken stuff away. So if there's some things that are different, then that's the reason why. But yeah, overall, just this book was phenomenal. The one reason why I gave it a 4.5 out of 5 was just because in the beginning, I didn't really like Theo as a character. I felt like her tone, the way she was talking, it was like a typical YA character, and I just didn't like that from her. For me, I felt like she should have been a little bit older. Like, I get she was meek in the beginning, and she's supposed to be weak and scared and everything, but just her tone, it was like, oh, this is like YA. It didn't feel like I was enveloped into the story with her. So I just, her character bothered me a lot, but other than that, that was the only reason I took off that 0.5. But yeah, so on to my review. So in the beginning, right away, you see the description of the gem history. So I guess in this land, there's different gemstones. There's a fire, water, earth, and air. And her people, like her specific group of people that were overthrown, they have the ability to control the gemstone and have that ability to use that power. So it's kind of like an elemental person. But if, like, for example, her mother, because she was a monarch, she couldn't control it. So it's kind of a give and take, which I did enjoy that aspect of the book because it's showing, like, you can't be all powerful. And Theo in here kind of has the affinity for fire, but she kept going back and forth with it because if she went for the fire, then she wouldn't be able to rule her new kingdom. So after that, like it was like really in-depth, the description, and I just loved how they went into that. She described the obsidian throne, which was very classic YA, where the king sat on. I think he's the king, or like, I don't know what they call him, or if he's like the emperor or something. I forgot what they called him in here. Oh, the Kaiser, which kind of was like Russian to me. But he sat on the obsidian throne, typical YA literature, pretty much Throne of Glass and Frostblood right there. That was pretty much like the usual. And then I said, he did keep a lot of slaves from the people that were overthrown, so I thought it was interesting her choice of using like the chains, and the people in the chains were paraded and not hidden. That reminded me a whole lot of the whole like Roman era of, I guess, time, because they would do that a lot. They would just parade their war criminals around. And then one of the quotes I took out of here that she described the Kaiser is, he's a shark that caught the scent of blood in the water. So I thought that was really like detailed. And overall, the writing in this book just blew me away. I just loved the writing in this book. Just everything about it. And the character development was really good too. They did also leave it to the end where there's a cliffhanger. And the one thing in here, very brutal and graphic. Very, very brutal and graphic. There's so much blood, and especially when all these fight scenes happening, it's so gory. So I feel like you need to kind of be more of a mature reader to read this, because it can scare a lot of people and possibly have trigger warnings in it. There's a lot of inner turmoil as well. And what also I wrote, it was effed up. I wrote this in my notes. Her maid, her mouth was sewn shut, which I thought that was insane, that they would do that, because they don't want people talking. They don't want people to have that power, and I thought that was such an interesting choice to pick, and I really congratulate Sebastian in that. And then when there's a lot of like other spoiler things, but it was cool how it wasn't cool because it was sad, but when she talked about the malnourished slaves, the detail with that was crazy. And it was just showed like in history, like what they did and everything. There was also some confusion with me too in the beginning of the novel with the Kaiser. His attitude I didn't really like, because it was like a lot of back and forth, and he wasn't like 100%, I guess, described the same, so I didn't really like that as much. But they had multiple gods in this book, so that was crazy. I really liked that. And she always reverted back to her mother's death too much, which I didn't like either. Like, she kept reminiscing that. And then there was pirates too. I was shook when that happened. Like, pirates, come on, it's pirates. And then I talked about how there was a fire god. There was an image of a fire god in the beginning. And there is bullying in this book too. But there was a fire god, I think you pronounce it as Hausa. And she had this picture, dream of the goddess of fire's daughter saving her. So that confused me too, but then it comes again later in the book. But there was a lot of war crimes happening that was described. Even though this is 10 years, this takes place 10 years after the war. So I believe she's 16 in this book, which makes sense because it's YA. But the war crimes were like brutally detailed in this book. And then we have a lot of details about sailing and boats, which I enjoyed, especially since we figure out that Prince Soren, who is the Kaiser's son, he is, I think he's the heir to the throne, but he also kind of sees her as a damsel. So they kind of play off that, and she tricks him and all this stuff. And then Soren, I felt like I had issues with Soren. Like, I mean, I liked him, but I didn't like him. I felt like he was too prissy, if that makes sense. Because the way she described him is he was supposed to be this all, like, war captain, general, sailor. He did everything. But I just felt like his attitude and the way he spoke, it was very, like, dainty. And I just wasn't feeling that. He wasn't even like Prince Dorian. That's an actual prince to me. I just didn't really like Soren 100%. And then eventually, after we get through all the descriptions and all that, you figure out that Theodessa's playmate when she was younger, who I think was her best friend, his name is Blaze. he ends up coming with two other people that were in her kingdom to try and get her to escape, but instead she creates this whole plan to like topple over the whole thing, kill everyone, and like she wanted to kill the prince and then kill her like best friend, who is the daughter of the guy that killed her mother, and kill him as well. Her name's Cress. So I thought that was interesting. That was a different spin of things, and they kind of sparked a rebellion, and I really, really enjoyed that part of the book. So once you get into the book, there's a lot happening. I just felt like it was so detailed that you have to really pay attention to read it. But I didn't like Cress either. Cress is her best friend, who she's gonna betray in this. I just didn't like it. There was a whole thing also with the bride thing. So Cress wanted to be engaged to Prince Soren, so she was kind of like in that whole thing. But Theodessa was trying to make it like, oh, I'm a damsel, save me. So then Prince Soren obviously became attracted to Theodessa instead. But then the Kaiser wanted to marry her off to someone who would eventually kill her, which I was like, that's so dumb. So I didn't really like that. But the whole thing with Blaze and Theodessa, there was so much like tension between it, just so much drama, and I did like the flashbacks she kept having to their childhood, because he pretty much just took over the same throne. So I did like a lot of the flashbacks, and their banter was just the best in this book. I really loved that. I loved him as a character. I wish we could see more with that. But yeah, as we get in depth in the book later, Theodessa, she ends up using this liquid called Incantro, which is liquid fire, and poisoning the Cress and her father. The father ends up dying, but Cress only takes a sip and she lives. She has extreme burns, but she ends up living. And I thought that was interesting. So there was a lot like elemental wise with like the guardians and all that stuff. So that was like a different twist on things. And then there was also, so I felt like overall this book definitely reminded me of the Throne of Glass book, 100%, with a lot of things that went on. So for example, all these people that were overthrown were put in this kind of a concentration camp, and they were forced to dig gems out of the mine, because the Kaiser's people, all those gems that were used for the Guardians to control their powers, are now just used for fashion. So they had like these earrings that are full of like fire gemstones and all that. But the thing is, if the Theodessa's people, if they dug up, they kind of went mind crazy, which pretty much means that they didn't have really control of their powers anymore, and they kind of just went insane because of how much power was in them. So at the end of the book, towards the end, you kind of see that Blaze is kind of getting mind crazy. So that definitely leads you to think there's another book, which I believe there is in 2019. I don't know if she has a title for it. I can see if she has a title. Oh, Lady Smoke is the next one in 2019. I have no clue if this is a series, duology, whatnot, but there was just so much in depth with this book that I really liked. There was a whipping too. Theodessa did get whipped, which I felt like was just crazy in this book. Just, it was brutal, like everything. But yeah, in the end though, really, I think that was what made me crazy, because what ended up happening is they ended up getting out and escaping. So, but Cress ended up realizing that Theodessa was the one that tortured her. I mean, gave her the liquid fire, and she basically like told her to burn and just go die, and she just hated her. And I didn't really like Cress too much. She kind of was annoying. And then Soren, Theodessa ended up not killing Soren, which kind of pissed me off, to be honest, because I felt like you had this plan, just do it. But as a YA character, she didn't. She ended up just taking him hostage, and they escaped, her and her 3 friends, and they ended up getting on a boat who is one of the pirates. I forgot the pirate's main name. I forgot what she called her, the pirate. Oh, Dragonsbane. Dragonsbane. She's like pirate of all pirates of everything. And I thought that was crazy that she made her a female. I really enjoyed that. So they ended up getting on the ship, and then she comes down, and of course, the Odessa's like so confused because we end up finding out that Dragonsbane is her mom's twin. So that's her aunt. And I thought that was crazy. So there was a lot of like, it's very confusing if you don't read it, but there's just a lot of twists and turns in this book. There's so much detail, which I really, really loved. And the hard copy of this novel is just beautiful. So I definitely recommend it if you are interested in this book or just want to read something fantasy, because this is your go-to book. So yeah, so that's it for today's video. I hope you really enjoyed it and kind of got my gist of what I'm saying about this book. I did write more on my Goodreads review as well, so it's linked down below. And if you have any other questions about this book or want to know why I picked it up or why I found it interesting, just leave me a comment and I'll get back to you, because I always do, guys. So I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I'll see you guys later. Bye!